Okay, so welcome back to the Purple Worm. It's been a little while, about just under 2 years by my reckoning, guys, since we last did an episode. You know, and
there's been a bit of
we've
a crisis in the world, and
a few things have changed a little bit as time's gone on, but we've tried to sort of get back together and sync our schedules, but we're having a little bit of a chat before we started, and all three of us are sort of in different jobs and have different schedules now, so we've just not been able to make it work out until Colin got in touch with us the other day and said he got a bit of a window opening up in his schedules, or should I say Mr. Green. And as soon to be, I felt like I should have bought an apple or something, but I'd be stereotypical.
Well, yeah, probably should have.
But obviously, in case you don't know, Colin's very shortly going to be completing his teacher training and going into a teaching post. So obviously, I'm sure that takes up a hell of a lot of your time, Colin.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. It's non-stop, mate.
Yeah, but luckily, Colin got in touch and told us that he got a bit of a window in his schedule opened up. So we thought we'd do this episode, see how we got on, and we're probably not going to go back to doing that anywhere near as regularly as we used to. But if we can do this episode and we're all still enjoying it and all still feeling the vibe, as the kids say, then
kids.
That's it, as the cool kids say. Then we might do a little bit more sort of, I suppose, sporadic or sort of like occasional episodes. We'll just see how we get on. But so I don't know which one of you guys wants to start off and sort of give us a bit of a rundown on what you've been up to since we all last got together and recorded.
Go on, I'll go first because I've made some notes. So yeah, as John said, I've changed job as well. Still in the funeral trade, but I've now moved closer to home. What have I been up to? Well, I was at UK Games Expo where I saw Mr. Large himself there, where he was running Games on Demand. I was volunteering this year, a great turnout. In fact, it was just shy of 30,000 people turned up. So it was great to see so many gamers there. And there was actually more traders there this year than there was on the last one. And when you consider that 30% of the traders used to be foreign, and we had no foreign traders this year because of COVID, it shows you how the industry has sort of bloomed in during the lockdown. So yeah, I'm still running the Dragon's Reel podcast. I've now put it onto YouTube as well as audio, and I'm trying to do some more videos, things like walkthroughs and reviews on there, just to change it up a bit to keep myself interested. And I'm also now a professional game designer. I've actually earned some money from writing games. Yes. Okay, that's not much.
Every little helps, mate. Every little helps.
I know. So there's a game called Breathless, which is based on Blades in the Dark, and it was designed by Rennie Pierre from Canada, and basically it's a survival horror game. And he came up with this Itch Jam, and if you know Itch at all, they have these game jams where you could submit a game, and I thought I'd have a go at putting a game jam on for it. So the one I wrote initially was called Cargo, which is your typical alien type thing where you're on a spaceship, you wake up and there's something else on board, or one of your crewmates is captured. I wrote it out, I sent it to the onto a Discord to see was it worth publishing, and I had sort of good positive feedback. Did a bit of art for it, so that went up, and then I got conned into writing a second one for the same game jam as well, which is modern urban fantasy. So think of your Dresden Files, Constantine, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that sort of thing as well. That one's called The Hidden. So they are both available on the Itch. They are pay what you want, but you can grab them from completely free. I don't expect any money, but if you want to chuck a couple of bucks, it's up to you, but it's not needed at all. So that was the main thing. So yeah, so that's got me into sort of the last 12 months, lots of the indie RPG scene. There's lots of good stuff happening on Itch. There's a couple of good discords around as well. There's the New School Revival, which is like a, if you think of the OSR, it was people that got fed up of the sort of the bad name OSR had got. They didn't like some of the personalities in OSR, so they set up the New School Revolution. And basically, it's very much old school games, but with modern mechanics. And there's sort of lots of great designers on there, like Chris McDowell from Into the Odd, Yoshai Gal, and people like that. So there's some great ideas out there. And yeah, I've been sort of getting into a lot of sort of indie games, game light stuff, just for something bit of a change up. Still listening to the podcasts. One I do want to shout out to, I'm not sure if anybody else is aware of it, Enworld Publishing. I know they do a podcast with Morris from Enworld Publishing. Well, Jessica, who's now their, I think she's their commercial manager, or she does a lot of the Kickstarters. She's got one called the Not D&D podcast, and she's interviewing people who are writing games that are not D&D, trying to push non-D&D games. And they've had some interesting people on that, so that's worth a listen. So that is what I've been up to in the last 2 years. Over to you.
Well, you've been pretty busy there, Pete, I'd say.
Just a bit.
Yeah, I have. I'd say the main thing that I've struggled with was going into COVID there and trying to keep some interest and keep a little bit positive. We managed to game through it as a home group, playing online, because I had like the majority of my family, so I game with my kids and my brother and a family friend. So we got onto the Google Duo type of thing, and we just set up a virtual gaming table, as it were, and just video and audio, and we played like that, and that just kind of kept my hand in, and in fact I think I was at the height of it, I was running 2 sessions, DMing 2 sessions a week, and I was playing my Chalk game. Then I had the idea of a career change and everything else, and then just got really pushed for time. I had been playing in quite a few online game sessions. I was in John's game. I had to regrettably pull out of that, but I was quite happy my brother stepped in there and kind of almost replaced me. So that worked out well. Worked out well for him. I still had things to do, and had the pressure, the time pressure, and that, and I had to pull out with some games with some of my American friends. But it meant being busy. The whole hobby thing became a little bit difficult to justify, and then when you're not really fully engaged with it, you have to make tough decisions, and you just start thinking differently. So for me, it's been a bit of a downsizing, and I've been, packing up my books, moving on some of my games, and in some ways, it's coming round again. It's given me new enthusiasm for some things. Like I've done a lot more like reading and listening to other podcasts, and it's inspired me to sort of like look outside of gaming, and now I'm bringing new stuff back in. So I think in some ways it kind of maybe shook me out of a rut, because you running I get a little bit burnt out if I run too many games, and I like playing. So yeah, it's been a funny couple of years, and now the one thing I wanted to try and keep going was the podcast, and I've managed to keep like either a weekly. Probably the worst I've missed is like the longest I've gone without putting a podcast out is probably 3 weeks. I've tied things over when I'm pushed. I tried doing some actual plays with our Curse of Strahd game, and I weren't super happy with them. I'd like to do something more with them. I've tried things like kind of trying to tidy up my back catalogue. That don't always prove popular. Not that it's all about being popular, but the main trouble with my back catalogue was obviously with an internet presence going into the teaching profession, you've got to be super careful about what you've got out there. Because your employer is expecting you, and like professional standards, you're expected to kind of present the right image to the public and everything. So you can't be ranting on podcasts and stuff like that. So so the role playing's all taken a bit of a knock. I feel like it's coming back round now. So we're doing this. I'm thinking again about starting Into the Jungle, setting a club up with the kids in school. We've got me index card RPG.
Well, I'll say that, Colin, just to interrupt you momentarily. We've just had a Evil Jeff in the chat who says, "Oh, you won't be able to let Jason bully you on the podcast anymore, Colin."
That's it. He does like to pretend to bully me.
But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I feel like I've not really done a great deal compared to like you two. I mean, Pete's wandered off into sort of like realms of independent games, and I'm still like clinging to my sort of D&D and like my OSR, like a sort of drowning man going down with the ship, like clinging to the mast. And just sort of, because to be honest, for me, like the whole thing, when I've seen no end of times on like social media when people are like, "Oh, there are other games out there than D&D," you know, and I'm like, yeah, I've always known that. Like, I didn't start with D&D, so like it always sort of takes me a little bit by surprise when that people wouldn't realise there are other games out there. Because like I say, I didn't start with D&D by any means, and I sort of came to it a lot later. So by the time I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, I already knew there were like scads of different games out there. But yeah, for myself, both me and the missus, unfortunately, we've just got over a bout of the older COVID, which wasn't too pleasant, but it could have been a lot worse. You know, it's just like bad flu when we had it. I've recently changed jobs, like your good selves, which has sort of changed my schedule around a bit. I'm sort of hybrid working, like half the time from the office, half the time from home. So there's a little bit more travelling involved. And I've got to admit, to be honest, I have to spend, because I'm in more of an IT role now, after sort of spending all day on a computer, you know, and trying to tell people how to like work computers. The last thing you really want to do is come home and then say, "Oh, I fancy another 4 hours in front of a computer," you know. So I've been sort of the podcasting's fallen off a little bit for me. I did have a period where I was literally like blitzing out like an episode every day, and I'd sort of like I was recording like a week or 2 weeks like ahead. But with like illness and stuff like that, it's sort of gradually like fallen off again. Hoping to start it up again, because I do enjoy doing it, but it's one of those things where people say, "Oh, why don't you just put out like a shorter episode or whatever?" And you think, well, yeah, but even if you only do like a 15-minute episode, you got to spend 15 minutes recording it, then you probably spend like an hour and a half like editing it, then you've got to upload it, and then you've got to like do all the thumbnails and do all the descriptions and find all your links and do all of that, and before you know it, you're like, "Oh, that's my evening gone," just for like a little 15-minute episode. And heaven forbid you, like I've seen some of your recent YouTube videos, Pete, like the one you did on Dungeon Alchemist, the most recent update I watched today. And even like, I don't mean, obviously not throwing any shade at you, but even like a fairly sort of simple video where you're like, all right, I'm just going to set it up and I'm just going to record it. It takes so much time to do it and get it right.
And often with YouTube, you do it 3 or 4 times, because if you do it a couple of times and it starts going wrong, or you realise something, so you end up going back doing it and then editing bits out, and 15 minutes can be half a day sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, it's funny as well, because it can be a thankless task. I think I've been all right. The stuff I did on YouTube, I've been all right, but you do get some funny old kind of feedback at times, and you think to yourself, I'm just doing this because I like it. I've kind of floated it out there. I'm not claiming to be some sort of authority. It's just
I did a couple of videos on Foundry, which was like a year and a half ago, and then you have people asking you questions now. "Oh, I've tried it, it's not working." I said, "Yeah, but that was 3 or 4 versions ago now."
I was just about to say a very similar thing. Like, I mean, I don't know how much you guys are experiencing, but obviously I've been on YouTube for a fair old while. I've got like a lot of videos going back ages, and people will suddenly like drop a comment and they'll be like, "Oh, but what about this thing you said at like 5 minutes 35 in like this video?" You're like, "I recorded it 5 years ago, mate." And it's like that thing where you want to answer the question, but at the same token, you're like, I haven't got like hours to go back and like listen to like everything. And as we all know, like opinions and things like change as time goes on. So it's like whatever you said like 3, 4, 5 years ago might not be what you think now, because you'll have changed with your experiences, and you'll have gone on, you'll have played different games and stuff like that. And I often get like people asking questions in relation to like the Fate videos I did, and I don't really play or run much Fate now. Not that I don't like it, it's just I sort of said my piece on it, and then I sort of moved on and did other stuff, and I'm glad people enjoy the videos.
You forget, because it's in the past, you forget how that runs, and people asking you questions, you think, I can't really remember how you do that in that system anymore.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't want to give like an incomplete answer, but sometimes you're like, well, I haven't got like an evening free to research it for the sake of like answering a comment on a YouTube video.
I think with the podcasting and YouTubing, you've got to enjoy it, because as soon as you don't enjoy it, then it becomes a chore, and it does get you down. And I've seen so many podcasts and YouTubers sort of burn out because they've got to put an episode out because people want it, they're not enjoying it, and then it just gets too much for them. So I think you've got to do it at your own. If you're in it for the fame and your money, you're in the wrong game here, because it's
yeah, you ain't getting it.
there's only people like Critical Role are making the money. Nobody else is. You think of all the thousands of streamers out there. If you're streaming your game, you're either doing it because you enjoy doing it, or you want to refer to it at some other point.
I think as well.
Get 3 million viewers, are you?
I mean, I think as well. For me, one of the reasons why like me and Hannah were doing episodes is 'cause it was nice to have like someone else you could bounce ideas off, and it was more of a conversation, which is why I've always enjoyed like these Purple Worm recordings. Whereas when don't get me wrong, I enjoy podcasting, but it's a very different experience when it's just you sat with a mic talking about a subject than if you've got someone sat with you or someone online and you're having an actual conversation. But unfortunately, because both me and Hannah have like changed our jobs now, our schedules don't like sync up anywhere near as well as they used to. And you know, when you sort of like you only get minimal time together as like a married couple, you know, when you have your quality time, you don't want to be like, oh, I know this is like the first night we've like actually spent together this week. Do you fancy going and recording a podcast episode all evening? You know what I mean?
The other thing is that I do one streaming game with the Murder Hobo show, and you do sometimes when you're streaming, you do think, I've got to be careful what I say sometimes. Most of the time, I usually forget, but you do think, I've got to be careful, because if this is on the internet, it could come back and bite you on the backside.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I've got to be careful with the streaming. I mean, ideally, probably the back catalogue of things that I've been in could be problematic, but I'm not going to go getting in touch with people and saying, "What's the chances, guys?" I'll just have to live with it. The difficulty is, I would like to be able to sort something out so that I could actually do a proper kid-friendly thing.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, what's the name? Is it Paris? Paris, what was his name? He was in the Savage Worlds world. He was an educator from Australia, and he was doing stuff with RPGs, which was to bring kids who had difficulties into playing RPGs.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And he had a podcast. I think he fell out with the Savage World community. There's a bit of a bust up, but some of the stuff he was doing with kids was really good.
Yeah, it would be good, but the difficulty is, of course, as soon as you get involved with that, you got to be so careful about children's identities, and there's so much safeguarding, and it seems like a little bit of a minefield. Not something I'd enter into lightly.
Well, it's funny, when I was at UK Games Expo, I was playing some board games with a couple of lads, and both of them were school teachers. And I said to him, right, maybe you can answer me this. I said, throughout the profession, throughout the sort of RPG hobby, there seems to be a bigger percentage of school teachers than any other profession, whether it be lecturers, school teachers. And I said, what is the reason?
Yeah, why is
And,
that? Yeah.
yeah, why is that? And I said, is it because you've never grown up? Or I said, what's the reason? And he said that he thought the reason was that that most school teachers don't like going out. They want to be inside. They don't want a job when they're outside. They want a job when they're inside, in front of a classroom, in front of people. And he said, and those sort of peoples are the same sort of people that like to play board games and role-playing games. They're not overly socially active, but they're quite happy to sit in front of other people in an indoor environment and communicate that way. And that's something that I'd never thought of. Maybe that was his own personal view, but...
And it's got a bit of an academic thing about it, hasn't it? A lot of reading and researching, and I think like people that are lifelong learners get into teaching. I mean, part of the reason I've got into teaching is because I discovered that when I was in schools, I just liked the environment and the energy, and I'd go and see my kids do a play, and I'd come out and I'd feel a bit deflated, and then I thought, well, if I actually worked in a school, I wouldn't have to have that feeling. I could get involved, I could be there, I could see everybody getting excited about a new subject, and there's all the other teachers that know all about the other subjects, and you're meeting them, you're chatting with them, and obviously that's not every teacher, and some of this is going to be my newness to it all. But yeah, you can walk on down to the music department. They've got all the stuff. You've got loads of resources that you can play with. So like, yeah, if you have got that inquisitive mind, or you maybe I don't know, whether it's fair to say you haven't grown up or not, I don't know. I think,
well, I don't think
I imagine myself younger than I am. I'm pushing.
I don't think any
50.
of us gamers have grown up, though, have we? My dad knows that I play games, and he'll ask me, are you still playing your games? Yeah. He doesn't understand it at all, but he knows it's my hobby, but he accepts it, but he doesn't understand it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, John.
No, I was going to say, I mean, in terms of like streaming games and sort of games I've been doing, I've been playing in Johannes's like Burning Wheel game. He's got like a regular sort of Thursday slot we do weekly, and then I've been still doing the Smoke and Snow game that Colin was in, and we've now got Half-Ed in, which is like every other week on Friday. And to be honest, much as I'd love to like be able to like do a second game, and I sort of keep umming and ahhing about it, I think the only time I'd actually be able to squeeze anything in would be on like the alternate Fridays, because I've just not got the time. And I mean, I stream those games, but I don't do any editing of them. I just sort of stream them like we're doing now, sort of as they are, and that's mainly for like my own reference, like if I need to go back and check anything, rather than, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great if people enjoy watching them, that's absolutely brilliant, but I got a few comments on like older videos where people will be like, I saw you like edited down some of these like old game sessions. It'd be great if you could do some of them for your more modern games. And I'm like, yeah, but I used to spend like 3 days like editing like a 4-hour session down into like half an hour, and I'm like, I don't have like a week to spend on like each game session just to like edit it down at the moment. So
it's interesting because I think so I put out some YouTube videos, and I think there's a point where you do something and you got a reason for doing it, and I think I like editing, and I like doing that thumbnails, and I wanted to look into the whole thing, and it was like learning it. And then once I'd learned it, there was not much return in it for me. It would then become almost like a job. And I've done this quite a few times with different things through my life. I've invested time in something to learn it just because I wanted to find out about it and sort of and learn it for the sake of learning it, and to be able to look back and say, oh yeah, I can put together a YouTube video and I understand a bit about editing, and I enjoy the process. But it's a bit like Pete was saying, once it served its purpose, you're just going to take all the joy out of something if you just keep on going at it and and driving yourself into the ground, and it prevents you from going on and doing something else. I don't think it's like it's not being defeatist. You've just only got so many hours in the day.
Yeah,
you can be a victim of your own success as well. Like you were saying there, John, just picking up on that. You've got a successful campaign running, and it's something that we all kind of, I can't generalize, but a lot of people are looking to get a steady game, a steady thing, keep it running, and they want everybody to get the depth to their characters and create this real nice richness about it all. And then the minute you get that, you start thinking, yeah, but how do I try another game now? And you can kind of you can't keep adding games, can you? And keep them all going.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I think ironically that's one of the reasons I'm still sort of like GMing after like all these years. I think if I ever got to a point where I was like, do you know what, I've mastered it 100%, that'd be the point when, like you said, I'd be like, I'm done with it now. That's great, I've learned it. Whereas I think even if, like you say, you get a regular campaign going, all the players are happy with it, which I hope they are in the game I'm running, you know, you're always sort of like looking to like, oh yeah, but how can I improve that a little bit, or how can I make like the next session better than the last session? And it's that sort of unattainable goal that you still sort of keep reaching for, which sort of keeps me interested in jamming after all this time, because there's always like someone who's like got like a new tip or a new trick or some advice that like you've not thought of or you've not tried. So there's always like new stuff to try. Like say, eventually if you get to stage where you're like, we've done everything we need to do with this campaign, we're going to wrap it up, there's always the next campaign, there's always another game, there's always like different groups of people you can game with. So you never get to that, certainly in my opinion, you never get to that stage where you're just like, I've done it, I've mastered it, see that game, I've mastered it.
Yeah. But well, it's funny because although I've been reading all these indie games and writing indie games, the games I'm playing are all 5th edition based, and I can't get away from it. So I got when COVID struck, my face-to-face group obviously couldn't meet, and I was the only one with IT skills. I played online, so I got them all online, and we started playing a 5e game, got them all into that, and after about 3 or 4 months, I got bored with it. It's like, you know what? I'm just not feeling it. So one of the other lads said, I'll tell you what, can I take that over? So I thought, oh, great. Yeah, you take that one over. And we're still playing that one. We're now doing the Frost Giants. We're on about level 12 with that one. And then on the alternate weeks, I've been running Adventures in Middle Earth. And that is a real good, I really like that version of 5e because there's not much magic in it. Characters are a bit more squishy. So I think
I've got to admit that's another one I've got in my my game shelf. So I've got the main 2 books as a hardback, and then when it was sort of going out and they did the Humble bundle for all the PDFs, I got all of those. So that's definitely it's I mean, I've run 5th edition, nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to sit here and like bash it. You know, if you like it, you like it. There's no problem with it as a game, but it just doesn't really like speak to me. It's not my particular flavour. However, Adventures in Middle Earth, when I've been reading through it, it's the only sort of 5th edition style game I've read where I'm like, oh, do you know what? Yeah, I quite like the look of this.
We're 41 sessions in now, and we're probably we're doing the Mirkwood campaign. I think the characters have been alive 13 years in game now, and we've probably got about another 23 years to go in that campaign. So probably another, well, I'm not saying that I'm going to do another 40 sessions, but we'll keep it going. Everybody's still enjoying it. So that one I'm running on Foundry Online, and we've kept it going. And then the face-to-face when that met, our old gaming group met in this venue. And when COVID hit, obviously we stopped gaming. The venue closed down. They moved to a new venue. And when the new venue opened up, they offered us a different night of the week and a smaller room. And we used to get like 50 players a night playing board games and RPGs. The new room could hold about 20 people on a different night. So the group split in 2. Half went to one town and the other half went to another town 30 miles away. And the 2 groups have gone their different ways. So I go to one of those groups. I only go once a month, but they asked me to run a 5e game. And they wanted a 5e horror. So I'm running Curse of Strahd. And funny enough, Colin, I was talking to Darren, your brother, at Games Expo, because you said you were playing Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
We had a chat about it I've not given him any spoilers, but I found out where he was up to, and it's surprising we're playing the same book and how differently our two games are going. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I get the impression that campaign could go like that. Definitely, because I owned the book for some time, and I had the most minimal of flicks through it, just really looking at the artwork. I think I read that. What is it? That
the Death House.
Death House. That's it. The Death House. I think I had a look at that. We never played that in the end, but I thought, oh yeah, this could be all right. And because once I got into running one of them, I run the jungle like it's a campaign. So this is Chult. I can't even think of what's it called, the proper title of it.
Something of Annihilation, isn't it?
Oh yeah, Tomb of Annihilation. That's it. So that's how much attention I pay to it. I don't even know what's written on the front of the book. So I've just used it as a setting, and it's got loads of like little places. But I've just as fast as I'm going through the book, I'm adding more in. So I'm never going to really get through that book. So I started looking at my bookshelf, thinking, oh, I need to offload some of that stuff. And then my brother was in a competition with the Dungeon Muser. He donated to his Hero Save Villages charity. Kev's super generous at running this every year, and loads of people donate. He's got a good channel on a YouTube, popular channel there. He's super professional. And anyway, he gets manufacturers sending all these like awesome prizes, and my brother won them like the real big old Beadle
Deluxe.
the big deluxe Beadles and Grimm thing. So he's got all these maps and all that, and so we're like, well, that's hundreds of dollars of stuff. Probably we should run that, and get the most out of it. And we was all sort of like stoked. It's got even little finger puppets in there and everything. It's just like crazy what's in there. It's packed full of stuff. It's a massive box. So we've dived into it and thoroughly enjoyed it. What do you think, Pete? Have you?
Yeah. We've actually got a 16-year-old lad. It's his first ever RPG, and he sort of joined it after about 8 or 9 sessions. So we've thrown him at the deep end. The rest of my players have been playing for donkey's years, but yeah, it's a good vibe. We did have about 9 players at one point, which was a bit around the table, which it was tough. I've got it on to about 7 now, but even it was 7.
All right, still a lot.
What I've running an online game and running an in-person game, I've just it made me realize how different they are to run. Although the games, you can be running the same game, same set of rules, running them is completely different, because online, I find it takes more prep, because you've got to find a map, because you need something visual. Then I end up putting walls on the scenes, finding audio to play, getting tokens for them. So and then getting my notes. So online seems to be doing more prep for the in-person game. All I do with that one is I take some flip books, the old Lucky battle maps. So I've got some battle maps. I just throw them on the table, and I can just draw out rooms on them or whatever. I've got some paper tokens which I've been printing out on the old Silhouette printer. So to cut them out. So it's just a matter of banging paper tokens on the table, and in person is a lot easier to prep for than the online version. But it is nice to be sat at a table with people sort of getting the reactions, as opposed to online, because no matter, even if you do it with video, it's still not quite the same as playing in person. So I'm getting the best of both worlds, and then I'm trying to, in person with 9 players, then things like initiative, I've learned how to speed that up. Roll for initiative. Whoever gets the highest goes first, and then we just go around the table clockwise, like the old ICRPG.
ICRPG,
and then that really speeds combat up. So running it face to face again is nice. And unfortunately, every now and again, like next week, I'm running the online game on Tuesday, and then the face to face on Thursday. So that's a bit of a manic week. Gets a lot. Being GM's like, a lot of pressure on, and it always runs. No matter what you do, it always runs well. Everybody has a great time, but I think as a GM, you put pressure on yourself, don't you?
Yeah,
you want a good game. You want your players to enjoy it. They always do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point you bring up with the sort of like the face to face and the sort of online. I mean, most of my games being sort of online, I suppose that didn't really change for me, like during like lockdown period and stuff like that, which was great because effectively we were already set up, so we didn't have like the adjustment that some groups had when they were like, all right, well, we can't meet face to face, we're going to have to go online, because we were like already set up for it, so we just pretty much carried on as before. But I've got to admit, as you say, I was at UK Games Expo recently doing like games on demand. It is nice to sit around a table with people and run a game. And don't get me wrong, I love running my online games, and I wouldn't be able to run games for the group I currently have if I was doing them in person, because we've got Johannes who's in like Finland, and we've got people all over the place. So it's great what you can do with the technology, but by the same token, it was nice even for just like the little sampler games for like games on demand to just sit down and run games with people. Although to go back to your bit when you're talking about like younger gamers, a while back now, probably a few months ago, I did like a small sort of like local convention where I basically put together like a sort of Jungle Island hex crawl, with the idea being like, oh, it's a couple of hours per game slot. You're one of a number of groups who've been hired by this like merchant guild who are just like, right, go and explore the island, find as much as you can. It was standard sort of hex crawl. I've got a big poster map drawn out, outskirts of the island drawn. It's all got a hex grid on it. You can only see like the trees on the outskirts and like the mountains, and the rest will sort of fill in as we go along. And it's like, right, pick where your boat's landing, go and explore the island for 2 hours and find out what happens. And we had like quite a few like younger people, sort of like 8, 7, 9, sort of playing in those games. And I don't really run a lot of games for like younger people. And I've always sort of heard people online when they're like, oh, you've got to be a little bit more like sensitive to like younger people like losing characters and stuff like that. And I've always thought like, oh, that's probably not for me then, because I'm an old school GM. I'm like, oh, if you're playing like a level 1 dunk farmer with like 2 HP and you get hit with an axe, that's probably it for you. But I basically just genned up a load of like pre-gens, and a big stack of them, and said to people at the start, like, if your character dies, we'll just say like, oh, you're a guy who fell a bit behind coming from the ship, and we'll just bounce you straight back in as a new character. And I tell you what, the younger kids absolutely
couldn't care less.
Could not care less.
Couldn't care less.
They were like laughing themselves silly. There was one guy who got literally.
You got violated.
Yeah,
That's it.
There was one like random encounter where it was a bit sort of like Land Before Time. So there's one encounter where like a T-Rex they encountered, and I just had it like burst out of the jungle, and literally there's this like 9-year-old lad's like character stood in front of it, and it was like, and that was him gone. And he was laughing his head off, and he was like, oh, I didn't see the way that T-Rex come out and like just like yommed me up off the ground. And
I think with the young kids is that they've not come with any preconceived ideas of what it's like. Some of the older gamers you find that may have played back in sort of 20 years ago, they're still thinking the game is like that now. A young kid has no idea what to expect, and that's what I found anyway.
My two favourites are like two young lads like playing in like various different games, and we had one guy playing in it, and they encountered like an orc shepherd who was like looking after his sheep, and he obviously didn't speak their language, so they were trying to make themselves understood. And this young lad was like, oh, well, while he's on that side of the hill, can I go around the other side of the hill? I'm like, yeah, of course you can, mate. So all right, because we're like running out of rations, I'm gonna go around the other side of the hill, I'm gonna like kill one of them sheep. I'm like, sound, no problems. So make a few rolls, I'm like, oh, the orc's heard you, he's not very happy, comes storming over the hill, sees you killing one of his flock, throws his like shepherd's crook at you. Oh, it's hit you, and it's like killed you. And he was laughing about it. Bounced straight back in as another character. Later on, they find this abandoned hut, and I was like making it clear that oh, this is where like that orc like shepherd lives, but like he's not home because he's out looking after his sheep. And I was like, oh, there's like, you look through the little window, there's like sheepskins hanging up on the walls, and there's a few little creature comforts and all this. And suddenly this like young lad playing this new character like turned into some sort of like NCIS like drug bust agent, and he literally was like, right, I'm gonna kick open the door and shout, where's the drugs? And so I burst into this like shepherd. So, and I was like, yeah, you go for it, mate. And the other players were like, we're a bit older, like, what are you on about, like, where's the drugs? And he was like, well, he might have drugs in there, you don't know. He's like, what if he's got like a can of drugs in about somewhere? And then we have this other young lad, like when he first started, there's like stereotypically there's like a volcano in the middle of the island, of course there is. And this young lad came in at the start, and he like the very first game, and he was like, So, oh, could there be a castle under that volcano? And I'm like, there might be, but you'd have to go to the volcano and find out. And from that point on, he was absolutely convinced there was a castle under the volcano. And he played in about 5 other like games we run. And anytime anyone was like, where should we go on the island? He's like, I tell you where we should go. We should go to that volcano and like check out that castle under it. And like the other groups like didn't know it. So I'd just be sat there like trying not to laugh. And these other groups would be like, what's he on about? Like volcano under the castle? I was like, I don't know. But like he's obviously like loving life. So let's just go with it. But yeah, it's great. It's great fun.
It's in one of the games I run. I've got one of the players, and he's a bit sensitive about his character. He's terrified of losing his character. And one week, one of the gamers couldn't play, and he was supposed to be running it. So I said, "Tell you what, we'll have a change up. Let's do a DCC funnel because they'd never done a DCC funnel." Nice. I said, "You get 4 characters, and if they die, you get more, and all this." And I did the Sailors Under the Starless Sea. I don't know if you ever tried that one.
Yeah.
Well, I think we had 3 players, and I think we had 17 characters killed. It was brutal, but they thoroughly enjoyed it, and I did too. Just like mowing through people. I think occasionally you've got to do something like that. Just throw characters in and not become protective of them.
It's interesting. A number of times, and I'm going to throw in one of my stereotypical out of left field type comments now. So be warned. How's it a funnel?
Brace yourself, audience.
How's it a funnel?
Right,
because like
you're funneling a large number, and you're supposed to come out with one at the end. And I think that's the idea of it. You funnel them out.
So get one out. That's always been my understanding. You start
because
off
you get out what you put in a funnel, don't you? Because if it'd be a pretty rubbish funnel if you put in a litre of fuel into your lawnmower.
And you only got a drop.
And then you only got a little bit out at the other end of the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a pretty cack analogy, but I think Pete's right. The idea is, you start off with like a large number of, so it's more the shape of the funnel, isn't it?
It's the shape of the funnel rather than the function.
You start off with like a bajillion characters, and at the end you've got like 2 or 3 or whatever, and they become the characters.
But yeah, the other thing I wondered if it was, well, is it a filter? So is it like, is your funnel got some kind of filter in it, like in schoolboy science you have your filter paper and you like fold it around in your funnel, don't you, a bit like a coffee percolator. And so I wondered, well, maybe it's that, but yeah, but it's always puzzled me a little bit. I get the concept.
I think if you're going to stretch that analogy then, like surely like the monsters and the adventure, they would be the filter, because they're what filters out the majority of the characters.
Talking of characters, some of my most memorable characters have been the way they died, and I remember them because that person died in a really strange way. And I was chatting to some people online, some friends. We have a little group, there's about 8 or 10 of us, and one of the girls there, she plays in about 8 or 10 games a week, and she's a bit of a games whore, but she's one of the ones we play with on the Sunday. And I was chatting to her one day, and I was saying about some of the characters I've lost, and she said she had never, ever lost a character in a game. I said, never. She said, never lost a character in a game, and was terrified that she was ever going to lose one. And I said, I've lost loads. In fact, I probably treat them too cheaply. I don't become attached to them. And I thought, you forget there are people out there that just don't want to lose a character at all.
I think for me, I mean, obviously I can't speak for everybody, but I think for me, when I'm sort of like looking at like other media I read, like books, and whether I watch sci-fi films and stuff like that, one of the things that always sticks with me in terms of that is, when you get like people doing the heroic sacrifice, like or like you get that sort of bit of a hero's journey when someone has to sacrifice something. So you see the whole bit in like the original like Star Wars when like Obi-Wan's like, I'm going to hold them off while you escape.
Or that one I remember you in the Cody's Barrow Mage with the table leg charging towards people.
Oh, that's right, man. But
things like that you remember, don't you?
Yeah, that's it. So it's like I'm probably the same as you, Pete. I'm probably a bit too cavalier with it, because if I see a point where I'm like, as long as you're not playing like a more sort of selfish character, but if I see an opportunity where I'm like, here's like what could be like an amazing like death scene, I'll probably go for it, because I'm like, do you know what? Like, okay, yeah, so I might lose my character, but would I rather go off like heroically holding back these 2 ogres while my mates escape, or just like randomly walking through a forest and like a rock hits me and like dunk, I'm dead?
Yeah, and And
So,
another one I've done in a couple of games as well. You know, these you play like a one shot or something like that, and then at the end of the scenario, the GM will say, "Okay, so the scenario ends. So where do we see your character in a few years' time after these events?" And the number of times I've killed my character off because of the events that have happened, because I think I don't want him to live on. Yeah, as a result of this happened. He was shot by somebody else that in a scenario they caught up with him and killed him. And then I remember it in that way. I'd have to bring it back again.
Tell you what though, Colin, and it just
you're going to say the same thing as me, aren't you?
you go for it, mate. If we're going to say the same thing,
You're going to, yeah. Well, it'd be interesting. Were you going to mention Big Mick? Yeah. So that was that was I don't know. It's like super poignant or super memorable. Anyway, just I never had a character go out of the game because he just got married. Basically, he just got married, and it stopped his adventuring career. And he went and settled down, had a little farm.
Well, when you think about
it was a happy resolution. How often does that happen?
Well, yeah,
how many gamers in real life stop gaming because when they get married, get a new job, and then they stop gaming for years, so stop altogether, don't they?
Well, I mean, in the case of like Big Mick, it ended up having like a dalliance with like a dairymaid, so like got shotgun wedding into like marrying her by like a dad, and then he was actually like, oh, this guy's actually like all right, because this guy had like always wanted like a son to take over like his dairy business because he was like quite old. And he was like, oh, actually, I'm a bit surprised you actually like were willing to go through with like the marriage and you were sound with it. So they got on really well. And he was like, oh yeah, I've now got a son to like take over my business. And Big Mick was like, oh, actually, yeah, do you know, I quite fancy being like the dairy baron of like this area. I mean, he just settled down and we did the whole, like little sort of outro for the character. And I was just going to mention it because like the amount of times that gets mentioned with my current group, whenever we sort of mention like outros and stuff like that,
all right,
it shows like how memorable I think it was, because that was games and games ago now, and like most of the people who are in that game aren't in the current group I run, but the people who were still mention it whenever we'd like talk about it.
And the story's handed down,
yeah, that's it, exactly,
generation upon generation. But
I mean,
it's funny. It just really works. It really works as well.
To give another example, like when your dwarf tried picking up that sun sword in the Old School Essentials game, and he got like burnt by it because he wasn't the right alignment. Like much later on, when they like found like a second sword that was similar, and so someone was like, "All right, I'm going to grab it." The other players were like, "Yeah, you might want to like leave that a bit. We've got like prior with that. You might want to be a bit careful with that." So it's those sort of like either sort of odd or sort of like heroic, I suppose, moments that sort of get remembered, like even like long after like the original game's finished. You might not remember anything else about the game, but you'd be like, oh, do you remember that time when that guy like settled down and started running a dairy farm? Or oh, do you remember when that we had that retainer who got like swept off through that underground river and stuff like that? And it's those sort of like heroic and sort of poignant moments that you really remember long after the game's gone.
That's it, yeah.
It's almost a bit of moments like that. I feel I almost get a little bit of game bleed, because I do try and, when I role play, I mean voices and that, Apache, I've been talking about it recently. Sometimes I talk in first person, sometimes I talk in third person. But what I always do is I do try and make those decisions that seem believable to the character, and try and be true to the concept, and try and be a little bit consistent. And sometimes that'll mean doing risky things. Sometimes I have played in games where I felt people were a little bit annoyed by the risks that I was taking. But it's not being that guy that's just like trying to stitch everybody up. It's like you're, playing out that wedding, thinking, well, actually, my guy comes from a scummy part of the Midlands. Yeah. He's in no great rush to go back there. He's landed in what amounts to more or less paradise, and it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, you were like, oh, everyone else is like, oh, we're keen to get back to our homeland and sort this out, and you're like, well, I'm like a scuzzy nobody from the wrong side of the tracks when I go home. Whereas if I stay here, I'm going to be the next like dairy baron. So I'm going to have land. I'm going to have a business. I'm going to have a family.
And to me, that's your role playing right there, isn't it?
I know some players, and no matter what game you play in whatever period, they play themselves in that game. Now, to me, I'm playing me every day of the year. I don't want to play me. When I play a game, I want to play somebody completely different from me, whether they be heroic or a chicken or a coward or whatever. And I want to hook onto that because that's not me. I want to do something different. But you get other people, no, I'm just playing me. And I suppose it's what you enjoy, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, I think probably all three of us, maybe not so secretly, like a bit of amateur dramatics. I mean, I played in games with all you guys, and we always
don't.
put on a bit. There's always a bit of performance and performing arts there, and I guess in my job it is a bit of a performing type of job. So I've always gravitated towards that.
I do wonder whether some of that as well comes from the fact we've all like either are or have been GMs, and obviously as a GM you sort of have to perform because you're doing all the NPCs, you're doing all the description, so you sort of you pick up those skills, and then it only seems like natural when you actually get to play a game, you sort of bring those skills to the fore when you're actually just doing a single player character.
Yeah, I mean, it is a style thing, obviously. Most GMs that I play with do seem to get into it like that, though. I don't think I've really played with many of your like hardcore referee type of arbiters that more or less want to sort of sit back and perhaps let the players do more of that and let the dice just kind of like determine things and let the dice speak for themselves, or just I don't know, maybe perhaps a little bit more flamboyant type of person gravitates towards the GM role. Yeah, I mean, it's a generalisation, of course.
I mean, I think for myself, I sort of try and like balance it a little bit. So I do like the idea of, sort of having, like, I love the open world sort of sandbox thing, where it's because I love my old school essentials, where you've got a procedure for wilderness travel, you've got a procedure for this, for dungeon exploration, etc., and you can let the dice determine it. But by the same token, when you have an encounter when you're in the wilderness, or when you come across like a traveling merchant that you've randomly rolled up, even though the dice have like determined all of that, you've still then got to like play the merchant, or you've got to play the monster or whatever. But even if it's just let's take the ridiculous standard, you've rolled a random encounter, there's like D6 orcs are going to attack you or whatever, you could just be like, D6 orcs roll up on you, roll for initiative, hit, miss, da-da-da-da. But it's not very interesting. So I do think as a GM, you tend to want to, like, you describe the orcs, what they're shouting at people, you describe them, they're waving like rusty, like scimitars about or whatever. And then you sort of get a bit more into like the role play of it. So I think with myself, I try and sort of like mesh those procedural and sort of things that I like with a bit of that sort of dramatic flair when an encounter or something like that actually takes place.
And it's interesting that you got some people, they're players all their lives, they've got no interest in GMing, and I've tend to found that most people that enjoy GMing it's been, why did you become a GM? Well, I had the rules when I was the first one to get the rules. If I didn't run the game, we weren't having a game.
Yeah, that's why I started.
Fall into that, and then you sort of you do play other games, but if I'm honest, I would rather GM every time than play a game. I do play games and enjoy them, but given the choice, I would run first because I'm probably more comfortable doing that.
I've got to say I'm exactly the same. I mean, I started off with like Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, like sort of back in the day, and the reason I started off with that is me and a few of my friends at the time were into like the sort of Warhammer miniatures games, and I was like, I enjoy the painting and I like the background, but like the actual like game itself, like the war game, isn't really doing a great deal for me. You still have fun with your friends, because quickly you like playing around with your friends, it's great, but I was like, the actual game's not really like, measuring things out and whatever, it's not really doing it for me. Then I found Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I was like, this is like the background we all know already, but it like seems a little bit more interesting to me. And again, because I was the person who had the book, I sort of sold it to my friends. I was like, look, it's set in the Warhammer Fantasy world, which we all like wargaming. Do you fancy giving this a go? and I sort of ended up being the GM by default, let's say, because I had the book.
We had you mentioned Warhammer. We had a great game not so long ago of the most recent edition. Is it fifth? Or, I've got a feeling it's the fifth.
It's
edition
the fifth edition. Yeah, it's fifth edition.
Yeah, Warhammer, and it's
Modiphius
from
now,
the. Eh?
Is it Modiphius that are doing it now? I think is it. Is it Modiphius or Cubicle 7?
Apparently, according to Evil Jeff, it's the fourth.
That's the fourth, is it? All right.
Well, hold on a sec. So, like, you had the original, like,
No,
the original
fourth.
Games Workshop one. Then there was the Hogshead one. Then there was the one after that. Then there was the board gamey one, and then there's the current one.
Which was the one with the funny dice? That third, was it?
No,
I don't know.
That wasn't third because. Well, I suppose it depends whether you classify like the Hogshead edition as a separate edition. That was more of a
Cubicle
reprint.
7 doing it. It says he's right. It is fourth, and it is Cubicle 7 doing it.
Oh, okay.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, because I didn't think it was. I didn't think it didn't sound right saying fifth because I don't remember thinking. I don't remember thinking that confuses me with like talking about fifth edition.
Yeah.
And I don't remember being confused by that, but
yeah, it's fourth edition. Yeah.
I'm guessing it's probably because I sort of counted the original Games Workshop and then the Hogshead one as different editions, and really the Hogshead one was just like a reprint of the Games Workshop one by like different people. So I'm guessing that's probably the same edition.
I just plucked a number out of the air.
Yeah,
I just said fifth, just top of my head. But we really enjoyed that. I just I bounced off it initially. Because it's kind of a big book, and I was looking at it and I thought, I don't know if I could be bothered. And then because my brother ran it, I'll tell you who I heard talking about it was that. Do you remember? Like, I don't know if they're still going or not. Mud and Blood, their podcast. I think they might have gone their separate ways now, and the thing's still going. But the two original guys were doing it, and they did a really in-depth few episodes. And I. Myself and my brother liked the idea of the character generation, the way they were describing it, and obviously, like you're saying, John, all the feel of it, that whole Warhammer world kind of idea. But I just found the way the combat worked quite engaging. It was quite refreshing and different. It was different enough. You play a few games, and I mean, to be fair, ICRPG, I could kind of level this criticism at that. Some games you sort of think, why am I playing that? It's that much like D&D. It's a toss-up and becomes quite a difficult decision of what to play. Not because they're so different, but because they're so similar. It's difficult to pick one from a crowd. Whereas this, we played it. And I thought, that's quite different. If you wanted to play a game because you wanted something different, that I feel would give you that feel. It felt a little bit more, I don't know, really hard to explain. I can't exactly say crunchy, because I just don't really want to say that. It just had this kind of richness about the system that I kind of can't put my finger on. And half the trouble is I only played one session because we were just testing it out.
Sometimes I think it's more about the setting than it is about the rules. If you've got a setting that you really sort of into, I think sometimes the rules are almost superfluous because you enjoy the setting that much. Like, if you like your Warhammer Fantasy setting, you could probably play it in anything because it's a setting that draws you in.
I mean, you tend to find that a bit sort of like later on in like D&D. I mean, obviously, like people talk about what editions they played, but like when you get to like sort of second ed, like AD&D, and you sort of ask people about it, people will be like, "Oh yeah, I used to like love Dark Sun back in the day," or like, "Oh, Planescape was like the best thing ever." Or did you play Council of Worms or whatever, or did you try Birthright and stuff like that? And they say it's those memorable different campaigns and settings that stick in people's mind. Although Evil Jeff in the chat has just said that third edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has been called an abomination, and some people won't acknowledge it, which I'm guessing is the board gamey one.
Yes, it's the ones that came with the
cards and everything.
The dice in it as well, the funky dice.
I had the edition before that, and I didn't buy that one purely because I'm not a board gamer. nothing against people who are, but I'm not a board gamer. And I was just like, do you know what? I can see what's going to happen. I'm going to lose half these pieces and all of that sort of stuff. And then I've either got to make like rubbishy ones on my own, or I'm not going to be able to play the game. Whereas I'm less likely to lose books off my bookshelf.
But then that morphed into Star Wars for FFG, you know, the mechanics, and that's took off. So I suppose it went in a different way for it. And it's funny how some of these old, like Spelljammer, that's coming back for 5th edition now, isn't it? There's a rumor that Dark Sun is coming as well. So some of these old settings are coming back for a modern audience.
Yeah,
I missed that. I talked about it actually. I think it was my last episode. Spelljammer. I've got some call-ins coming up on Spelljammer as well. I remember that coming out, and I remember looking at it, and at the time, I don't know. It just didn't seem to capture my imagination as a kid, which is
Elves in space.
Weird. Yeah, it is weird. Or that's my recollection of it. It could well have been the whole money thing as well, because like you're doing a paper round earning like £3.50 a week or something, and these games were actually, I think they were like more expensive then in proportion. Not only did you not earn a lot, but they, for a long time, they've been really quite good value. You know, a rule book just recently, it has kind of been the same price for a long time. But now, if we're talking about, we were talking just before the show about the price of paper and that going up.
Yeah,
that's all going to go out of the window, and it'll be like, for me, well, at the minute it feels like my hobby is back to that kind of status that, you know, I've almost got to save up for a book or something. Well, you know, selling off your books, selling off your other books to get money to perhaps carry on with the hobby.
One of the things I do like is with the sort of print on demand becoming sort of more of an option. There's a lot of the older stuff you can like now get hold of. So like I've recently bought a print on demand copy of the old, what's it called? The old like Kingdom of Karameikos.
You said that, the Grand Duchy of Karameikos, Gaz 1. Yeah,
Gaz 1, got a copy of that. And I've actually not long ago picked up a print on demand copy of Spelljammer, which you can get fairly reasonably for print on demand. I mean, obviously it's not the best quality in the world, but it's like perfectly usable, and you can still get it at a fairly reasonable price. And often, because they're sort of, certainly for myself and like us in the UK, you know, they're shipping sort of locally from like Lightning Source, you're not paying a gazillion pounds in like P&P. So I think that's been like a really cool thing. So I've often found myself like there's a lot of like the Goodman Games, they're doing like the original Adventures Reincarnated, where they sort of they bring back an old module, they give you like a reprint of it, and they put like a 5th edition version in. And I've got quite a few of them, and they're really nice books, but they are like massive books, and it can cost quite a lot to ship them. So they've just started doing another one, which is like the Dark Tower, which Janelle Jacquez did.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, they did like a reprint of like the original of that like a few years back, and I just went on Amazon and found like that reprint for a lot cheaper than I can buy like the big sort of new like chunky book they're doing, because I'm like, I don't really need a 5th edition version of it. So
I've got loads of PDFs, but I tend to, if I'm going to run a game, I want the print version.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah.
PDF. I enjoy reading PDFs for ideas and that, but if I'm going to run it, I want something tactile in my hand, something I can flick through. I don't know. Maybe it's
I've gone the other way now, downsizing. And the weird thing is, you know, you're talking about that contrast between in-person play and online play. I'm now thinking I'm going to end up with this weird mixture of both, because it's looking like the school club could quite reasonably be a bunch of year 7s on Chromebooks sitting in the classroom with, you know, we've got like a big intelligent whiteboard thing, and it is literally like your dining table up on the wall. Amazing piece of kit. They cost like $5,000 or something a piece. And with ICRPG, I was thinking I might end up it's almost going to be easier for me to bang up the Runehammer VTT on this big massive board. They get to fiddle about with all the, because Hank's done, so the creator Hank Infernale, he's created all them tokens. I know you guys are familiar, but for the people that are not, the tokens and the assets that he's provided are, they're just an amazing resource.
It's
And
true.
the prep thing that you were talking about there, Pete, a lot of that won't apply. I'll have these random cards because he's got all these cards. You could like slap them up on the board, slap up the tokens. The kids are super engaged. For some reason, they're really engaged with their computers and their gadgets and everything. I can put it all in the Google Classroom. And you just give people the joining code. You're not scurrying about printing out stuff and getting them copies of this and that, which get lost. It's all tidy. So I would definitely want to.
So you're almost having
style.
an online game in person, aren't you?
An online game in person. So you're all there and you're all potentially sitting around a table. Whether they actually are on their computers or not, it might turn out that it's character sheets at a table. Maybe we all gather up at the front and they're more or less pointing on the board and just dragging their tokens around with their finger because it's touch.
Pre-COVID, I had a big 40-inch TV on the table, with the maps on it. And because the lads were saying, "Are you bringing it again?" I said, "Oh, it's just a pain in the ass to put in the car and cart around." To be honest, but if you've got something already set up, it's ideal.
Yeah.
Because that's been weird. During COVID, the number of VTTs has absolutely ballooned, and every week I go online. Just today, 2 new VTTs have been announced. Scene Grinder, a 3D one that runs in your browser, RPG Stories, another one. And you think, okay, I know Roll20 is still the king. Foundry and Fantasy Grounds are the next big 2, but it seems like if everybody else is like scrambling for the scraps of what's left over.
I'm
all about that Owlbear Rodeo now, man.
I know you and Sly Flourish. I know it's if I didn't have Foundry, probably Owlbear would be the way I go.
I've got to admit, I had some like technical like issues with Foundry, and we just like, we just want something simple that we can like jump to. So I just like put all of the character sheets in like a Google spreadsheet, gave them all the link to that, and then was like, all right, here's a link to like Owlbear Rodeo, and so I dropped my maps in there and like use the default tokens. Right, let's go.
As a player, my favourite one is Tabletop Simulator because it's just like sitting around a table. Gary, that runs the Sunday game for us, I mean, he spends a lot of time doing the maps. But when you're playing and you can move around the maps, you can move your token around, see it all different levels. For me, it's just the best. I know it costs money and it's a pain in the bum to set up, and he's got to find the 3D tokens. But I think 3D is definitely the best experience online. But if you want simple, then I think. If somebody had no money, I would say go Owlbear Rodeo or Runehammer VTT, the very similar sort of.
Similar, yeah.
Anyway, speaking of games, guys,
are
there any games that you guys are particularly looking forward to in the near future? I know Colin's trying to like downsize a little bit, but are there any games, whether they're games you're running yourself or systems that you're particularly looking forward to seeing?
One setting I really want to play in, but I don't like the rules system, is the Numenera setting, the 9 worlds. I think like sci-fi fantasy on sort of this planet is sort of like generations in the future. Is when I read I think I've got the original Numenera one and I think it's the Destiny one I've got, and the flavour with the ciphers and all that, I thought, it really sings me. But the system, I'm not keen on.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I've run it a few times, and like the system's my least favourite bit of it.
Yeah, but there's an indie game called 2400 by Jason Tocci. I'm just in the middle of I've done a review of it, and I'm just in the middle of editing it. But it's a series of about 12 or 14 modules for a very, very simple system, 2400. It's basically a skill dice, which is either a D6, a D8, a D10, or D12, and you're rolling against a target number, 5 plus a success. And it's a really simple game, but he's done one of them is called Zot, and it is Numenera. So I really fancy running, like something really rules light in that setting where you can just riff off the ideas, and you can generate monsters dead easy, artifacts. So that is one setting I would love to try, and I'm hoping maybe sort of like in the summer or at the end of the summer to run it for few lads at the local gaming group just to do the setting, because I just got like ideas swimming around my head with something like that.
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay earlier. I've recently got a copy of this, Warlock, which is essentially, the rule system's very similar to like the old fighting fantasy that I know we've talked about in the past on Purple Worm. You know, you've got your stamina and your luck, but then it's basically got like a very simple version of the Warhammer Fantasy like career system, sort of like grafted on top of it. So instead of just having like, oh, you get stamina, luck, and then you get skill, in this you have actual like skills, and they're based on what career you go into, and each career is like, this is the maximum level of skill you can get in this area while you're in this career, and you have to like move on to another if you want to improve it more. But each career you're in, you also have like what's called a career skill. So as well as all the other skills, if you're a thief, you will have a skill called thief, which if something's like not covered by any of your other skills, but it's within the purview of being a thief, you can roll that. Then you might go on to like, oh, I'm going to be a butcher or whatever, and you'd have like a class skill butcher. So it's a little bit lighter and a little bit less dense than Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. But as the author says, it's basically their sort of it says a game inspired by the early days of British tabletop gaming. Greg Saunders, the guy who wrote it, it's pretty much like, I like fighting fantasy, I like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Let's bring them together. And I quite fancy. I've not got around to running it yet, but I've really enjoyed reading the book, and I quite fancy giving that a go.
I was chatting to some guys online today, and I was saying, if I was to run a new 5th edition game, I would get rid of skills altogether and go for the old DMG optional rule, as if you've got a background and your background's applicable to what you're trying, then you get your proficiency bonus. Yeah. And that's, similar sort of thing to that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the that's pretty much the way Castles and Crusades works.
Some games have, you've got your attributes, then you've got your skills, and you've got abilities. I'm sort of going more now, either you have attributes or you have skills. You don't have both. Yeah. And I think,
I said that's pretty much the way like Castles and Crusades works from Troll Lord Games, because that's basically like the old D20 D&D, but instead of having skills, you roll, you add like your attribute bonus, you're trying to beat a target number, and if it's something that's within the purview of your class, as well as whatever like stat modifiers, you get to add your level to it. So it's like a thief, you don't get all the like weird different skills you get in other versions of D&D, but you get to add your level of thief to it. So at the first level, like, you're probably only a little bit more likely to like be able to pick a pocket or whatever than anyone else. But when you're like a 10th level thief, and you're like, oh yeah, well, I'm not only adding my dex modifier, I'm also adding 10 to it because I'm a thief. Like as you go on in levels, every sort of class becomes like a lot better at their class stuff. Obviously, you need a bit of adjudicating, because you've got to be able to define like what's within the purview of each class. But I it's certainly one of my favourite like D20 games, just 'cause it's very simple and it's all attribute based.
I was going to say, and unless your thief is Shifty Mick, who's like the worst thief in the history of all thieves. My Castles and Crusades character, he was shockingly bad.
Yeah, I played the pulp version, Amazing Adventures. That's your Indiana Jones. I mean, the rules are very similar. Instead of having armor, you have like a fedora, gives you like an armor class 12 wearing a fedora because you look cool.
What was their system? Is it Siege Engine or War Machine?
Or Siege Engine.
Siege Engine, yeah.
See, it's another one that I've been looking forward to is Stone Top, which is a PBTA game. It was kickstarted nearly 2 years ago, and it's PBTA fantasy in a Stone Age, in an Iron Age, and had a lot of hype when it came out because it'd been play tested for about 2 or 3 years on the circuit. So I went in on it. It was supposed to be delivered October last year, but there's been delays. They've gone back to play testing. There's been health issues with some of the authors, but to be fair to them, they've offered all backers a full refund if they want it. I've not gone for that. I've said, go, you know what, I'll hang on. So that's supposed to be coming out later this year, but they're saying now we're not going to put a definite date on it. But yeah, I've played a couple of PBTA games, and sort of the playbooks. Of course, we did Dungeon World, didn't we, at Iron Cow just before COVID?
Concrete Cow, yeah.
Yeah, Concrete Cow, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good little
fun
game.
That
Yeah,
was
it was real high octane, wasn't it?
yeah. So yeah, I think yeah, a PBTA fantasy game might be a bit of fun. So that's another one on my list. What about yourself, Colin? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I've pledged to Mr. Connolly, Jason Connolly, of course, Nerds RPG Variety Cast, and I feel whilst we're gathered here, probably should make mention of Cerebrivore. As
It's true, yeah.
John, you did your little intro on there, and I would have to maybe say that listening to Cerebrivore maybe got me thinking, oh yeah, it'd be quite good to get a band back together and record that kind of group thing. So I feel like that would be fair to give him and the guys. They got a rotating cast, of course, but Jason's pretty regular on there. You've got BJ, the Arcane Alienist, on there, pretty regular. Carl Rodriguez, the Gemologist, presents on there. Joe Richter's on there, pretty regular. Daniel from Bandits Keep dropped in. I think Menyon dropped in there. So they've had quite a variety of people on there.
I keep angling for my invite, mate, but it's them time differences.
Well, yeah, I don't know how that would work. I could probably figure something out. But yeah, Kids on Bikes. I told him I'd do that, so I've got to do the Kids on Bikes thing before.
Well, I'm sitting on the Stranger Things set now. If you're YouTube, this isn't my real living room, by the way. If anybody's watching, this is the Stranger Things set.
Anybody that was wondering. Yeah, but I really want. Like I say, I want to dive back. I want to kind of more or less rediscover ICRPG, and I've got his most recent. I've got the Master Edition, and I haven't actually read it yet. I got stitched up on that. Did I tell you I got stitched up? I ordered from this disreputable. You
didn't order from America, did you?
No, I ordered from this turns out to be disreputable company over here that's since now gone under.
All right.
No surprises. And I'd ordered the collector's edition, and I thought, that's a decent price. I'll order that. And then they just sent me the regular edition, and I thought, oh well, that ain't so great. That's not such a good price anymore. I got the regular edition, and I kind of got my hearts in it because I've bought everything there has been for ICRPG up to that point. And I thought, oh yeah, because I never get the fancy edition of anything. And I thought, well, for ICRPG, I'm just going to do that. So I was like psyched up for it. Then this other one, and to be fair, there's nothing. It's still nice. I do like it. I don't like paying full whack for it when I was wanting something else. And then it's the to and the fro, all the time you waste complaining to try and get it resolved, and people blanking you and turned it into, left a real sour taste in the mouth. So the least I can do now is at least get some mileage out of it, get the book going, and try and put all that bit behind me. So that's what I'm looking to embrace, the ICRPG. Hopefully with the school club, but if not, I'll DM Ricky perhaps a break and play.
Because I think with ICRPG, if you get new players, you can tell them that you're playing D&D, and they're probably not going to notice because you're rolling a D20, adding your attributes. I think ICRPG is a good introductory game as well for new gamers because it's simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree there. I mean, it's one of the. So I've got a copy of the most recent edition as well. Although, I've just got like the Paupers copy as well. I haven't got the special edition.
Yeah.
But not because I was stiffed like college, so I'm too tight to like pay for the special edition. But I've got like the old edition as well. I've not got around to running like the sort of Masters edition yet. But I've ran quite a few one shots of the previous version, and I always take the Masters edition with me when I do games on demand, just because there's so many of the different little worlds at the back that and because it's so D&D, like it's very easy for people to like get into, and you've got the visual thing of the cards, and putting the D4 little counter on the table, and stuff like that, that people really seem to go for it. It's dead easy to get into, especially if you're doing like pre-gens for something like Games on Demand. Very easy to get into, very easy to run. And for me, like when I'm sort of traveling by like train to like the Games Expo, it's just one little book that I've got to put in and like a few index cards, and that's it.
Yeah, I could safely say that, you know, if I turned up on a games night and somebody said, "Oh, we've got nothing to run tonight," even without the book, I could run ICRPG off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It's dead easy to run, isn't it?
And you know the other thing that I like about it, you know how games will attract a community around them. I've always had a really positive experience with the community around ICRPG. There's a kind of you know, there's loads of good communities, but I often find something will spoil, you know, something for me, and I just I'll back away. I'm not going to raise a massive scene. Just like, man, that's probably not for me. To be fair, it's, you know, it takes two to tango, and
or tangle,
or tangle.
It takes two to reach some tango.
You know, it might not be the game for me, you know, or the community for me, and it's better for everyone if, you know, you step back. But with the ICRPG community, I've really liked the open-minded DIY kind of creativity.
Yeah, there's a lot of very sort of positive energy about the ICRPG. They're all like very enthusiastic about the game.
Yeah, and really creative and enthusiastic, and there's a lot of, this is what I've made, this is what I've made, this is what I've made.
I mean, I do wonder whether,
not so much wrangling.
Yeah, I do wonder whether part of that's because obviously ICRPG started off as sort of Hanker Inferno, was like D&D house rules, then it became something else. So the game itself is very sort of like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's very sort of like bodged together and sort of homemade, you know. So when someone comes in and goes, "Oh, I've made this new thing for ICRPG," the community as a whole doesn't tend to be like, "Oh, well, that's not how you should be doing things in ICRPG," because like ICRPG itself was someone's like homemade version of a different game. So
I think that's a very good point, actually, John. Yeah, because like the guy, it's him. He's running it. He's kind of set the pace, hasn't he? By saying, "Yeah, man," he's always welcomed that. So it's
but what I
it's
tell you
not
what was
like this canon. It's not this sacred.
I tell you what was
canon.
really funny though. Just after Master Edition came out, then Hank found Old School Essentials.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
and then he was waxing lyrical about, "Well, because this great new game." Well, no, that's the original game. How it was. Everything else is based on. But, yeah, it was
and I know what it means though. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of Old School Essentials, but I know what it means because obviously I was like familiar with the older versions of D&D. And a lot of people have often said, like when I've been like chatting about it, going, "Oh, well, you can just get the old version of the game." And it's like, well, yeah, you can. But the thing about Old School Essentials is like, right, I'm going to take the old game and I'm just going to reformat it with like sort of modern ideas of like formatting, make it a lot easier and straightforward. I'm going to iron out a few of the inconsistencies and just give you like a nice sort of like polished thing that's easy to reference and that you can run. So I can see why you got so enthusiastic about that, because I was like, oh, this is sort of what I wanted the original game to be like in terms of like it being laid out, and it's still the same rules that I'm familiar with.
Yeah,
and Gavin was meticulous with it as well. It was painstaking. Yeah. You know, having spoken to him about little bits and bobs in there, realizing how serious he's taken it, talking to him about fonts and
I mean,
just every little thing is pretty OCD. I think by his own admission, OCD.
You know, having facing pages, you haven't got to flip over because something's missing. Just stuff like that. I mean, I went all in Old School Essentials, but I have to admit, if I was going to run that style of game, I'd probably use the old white box rules. You know, the old
like
medieval one, FMAG one. That's sort of probably because it's condensed in one book, but it's the same game. Really.
I tell you what, I've got to admit, there's one thing I do like about FMAG as opposed to like all the other like various versions of D&D I've got. I love the fact that how it does thieves. It's like you've just got one skill that's thievery on a D6.
Yeah.
And if you want to do anything thiefy, you roll that skill. There's none of this you've got a separate climb wall skill, you've got a separate move silence skill. Yeah, it's just like, here's how good you are at thieving. Roll that D6.
Yeah, that's it.
I like that.
But Evil Jeff again in the chat saying, preach the gospel of like OSE, and yeah, I will carry on like preaching that all day long, like Evil Jeff. I love my OSE. But yeah, I'm the first to admit that like if you're looking at the core sort of like basic fantasy version of Old School Essentials, it is, aside from like a few like where they've ironed out a few inconsistencies, it is basically OD&D or Beck Me. I forget exactly which one it's a sort of port of.
And BX and Bet Me,
yeah, BX, yeah. And but that's fine because, like I say, for me, it's just taking like a rule system I already liked and just making it more accessible and more easy for me to reference in game. I mean, I've like a book I've got here. I would just open on the table next to me is this little like Old School Essential like reference booklet.
Oh yeah,
which is just like all the tables and stuff in it. And then sort of here I've got this because you can use like BX stuff with it. I've got this like little BX monster.
I've got that one, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
With just like all the monsters in. And it's like, even though I use like ascending armor class in like my games, which I know like probably puts my like OSR card at risk, but it's like, how difficult is it for me to go like, oh, what's they use ascending AC in here? All right, I've got to take it away from 19. It's not difficult, is it? You know, you can do it all on the fly, and I've got all these monsters here, and it's like, yeah, okay, you don't get loads of background in this because it's just a table, but it's like everyone knows what like a stone golem is or what an orc is.
If I was going to run Old School Essentials, I'd like to use the advanced, the AD&D classes, the advanced.
The advanced fantasy
that you
stuff.
did.
Yeah,
Advanced Fantasy. So I thought, oh yes, that'd be good to run some of those AD&D classes in the old BX game.
Yeah, and
I play tested some of them with Gavin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we had great fun. I was playing the
sniff nibbly.
Yeah. Easy for you to say.
Yeah, it's great fun. I know that catches a little bit of flack, that book, or it seems to. I kind of get wind of a little bit of flack being thrown at that book, but I really like the way that he did that. It was clever. I mean, it's not for everyone, obviously. I don't feel I need to caveat that particularly, but he was clever, BXifying it.
Yeah, if you play AD&D, you ain't going to enjoy that. But if you play BX, I think you're more likely to enjoy, using the advanced characters in your BX.
I mean, I think the genius for those, exactly right, Pete. I think the genius of those was it's taking those essential ideas for those classes, and then, like you say, sort of rendering them down to like a BX format. Because obviously, like the sort of power scaling of like AD&D and BX are quite different, but sort of keeping like the essential core of them as they were, but scaling it back. Because for me, there's no slight on AD&D. If you love AD&D, that's great. But for me, it's more complicated than I want.
Yeah,
I like BX because it's simple, but I also want to have paladins and stuff like that in my game. So
that was my experience as a kid. We played BX to death, and then we found AD&D. Oh, right, bought the DMG, the Monster Manual, the Player's Guide. We went to play it. I mean, after a few games, we went, we don't really like this. This is too much, and we went back to playing BX because that was more our jam.
We just mashed the rules. We ended up just mashed the rules together and kind of did a simplified AD&D, I guess. So trying to run, well, we basically in a 12, 13-year-old style tried to do what Gavin has made a more clearly more thorough and thought out job of. We were just going like, oh yeah, like John says, oh, we want paladins, what about cavalier, what about barbarian, and we trying to just mash them two together. And back in the day, I'm not even sure we read the rules enough to understand that really they were two different games. I can't remember.
I'm probably not even sure that I ran BX properly because what was I, 16 at the time? Didn't know how to. I played war games, but didn't know how to play role playing games.
I think for me, like I say, at the time when I sort of like, because the only real like AD&D books I had were like the sort of core 3, like second edition books, and then I got a couple of others like later on that like people just got me, and because I was playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay at the time, and the rules for that was similar enough to like Warhammer Fantasy Battle, the war game that we'd already been playing, that we sort of like quite easily moved.
Was the same.
Yeah, we quite easily moved into that, and then when I got AD&D, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Don't really know much about it. Picked them up, read through the books, and was like, oh, this seems really interesting. I'm not going to run it though, because like it was just more complicated than I was comfortable running. And it wasn't until later because my game shop didn't have like BX and stuff by then, because I was like a bit sort of later to D&D. That it was only later on when I sort of started like discovering the OSR stuff, and then becoming interested, like, oh, what are these different versions of like BX and White Box and the three little brown books and Beck Me and stuff like that. What are these games that it's based on, these versions I've not heard of, that I then started looking back at the earlier versions and going, oh, these are more my speed, because I just want a simple system that I can get on and run a game with.
But it's funny, we seem to be in another golden age of RPGs, because no matter what you want now, somebody out there is writing it.
Yeah.
As a small individual, you can get your work out in front of millions of eyes. You can publish really easy. I just think it's cool to Stranger Things has made D&D cool. It's not like when I was in school, you wouldn't. A few of your mates knew you played D&D, but you wouldn't go around telling people. Nowadays, people shout it from the rooftops. It's I think it's just a golden age for anybody coming into the hobby, because you got so much choice, so many people that want to play. I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was watching a YouTube video the other day, I forget the name of the channel, but it was basically someone who was looking at like the Google search figures for like D&D, like people trying to find out about D&D, and he was saying that literally like every time like a new season of Stranger Things comes out, like the D&D search term, like the graph just goes straight up.
Well,
Really?
Well,
Yeah.
here's one for you. I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, but in the latest series, Kate Bush is running up the hill, appears in one of the episodes with the D&D
Nice.
character, and she wrote it, she sang it, she published it, and 37 years later, she's making £250,000 a week off that song because of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good on her. So I'm writing the song now for that to get played in 30 years' time. Make me some dough.
I've got to admit, I watched the first two series. I've not really watched any since, but
This series is good. They've got the bad guy in this is Vecna, which is obviously a play on Vance. And D&D Beyond, which is now owned by WotC, have got a Vecna character on there, so you can actually play the monster from the series as well.
yeah. Because I was going to say the YouTube channel I was watching with like the Google figures also tracked like the various sort of search terms for like the various bad guys, like Demogorgon and Mind Flayer. And again, with those, like when the series came out, just like people just trying to find out on Google, just shot straight up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this latest series, they really played on the old 80s D&D cults. The normal people in the show are saying, they're all cultists. They want people to die, and so they're playing on that fear that was in the 80s. So it's a bit of a retro feel for people like us that lived through the time. It's like, yeah, that was my time. And there's a new D&D TV series coming out, isn't there?
Is it?
Yeah, I think it's a series and a film. The film's Chris Pike, the D&D film, but I think they're doing a series as well. So
What, like a
Netflix,
dramatization
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
Okay.
But I know people in the industry say it's great that D&D is doing so well, because if D&D does well, the rest of the industry does well. The likes of Cubicle 7 and Free League, if D&D does well, they sell more books.
Oh yeah, it's a whole rising tide lifts all boats, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've got to admit though, talking about D&D like lifting other things up, I only narrowly avoided like buying, that advanced like 5th edition that's been
I bought it.
out.
I bought it. Yes,
I narrowly avoided it. I was stood with my missus like in the games exhibition hall at UK Games Expo, and we literally we had like half an hour when we weren't running games to like run around it. And like because I was running around, I didn't see much of the RPG stuff. I just saw mainly board games, and I ended up just stood next to that stall, and I was like, "Oh, they've got all those books now." But then I was like, "Oh, it's like £50 a book."
I know. I kickstarted it, so it was a bit cheaper.
And I was like, to be fair, my missus said to me, she's like, "Look, if you want to get them, like this is the cheapest you're going to get, because you're not going to be paying like P&P. So if you want to get them, get them." But I was like, "Oh, can I really justify spending like £150 on like a 5th edition game that I'm probably not going to run?"
Well, my confession, at UK Games Expo, my impulse purchase, I'll tell you the story first. So I played Mutant Year Zero and was like, not sure if I like the Year Zero engine. I kickstarted Forbidden Lands, read it, I thought, it's too much the same. So I sold both those on. Then I did the Alien Kickstarter. We played about 8 games of that, and I went, no, don't like this Year Zero engine, so I've sold all my Alien stuff. So that all went. And then walking on the show, I saw
You bought
Vason.
one again.
I saw Vason. I thought, oh, and it's probably not years. In my mind, I had, it's not the same rules, but I've since realised it was Symborum that's the different rules. So I bought Vason, got home. Oh shit! It's Year Zero engine again.
What an idiot!
Oh, I know. It's like, so it's another one of those. I'll probably play the setting, but not with them rules.
For sale soon, folks.
my famous
Get in
thing
touch
is-
with Pete.
Yeah, the famous thing is when we played Alien. If you don't know, you're rolling up a handful of d6s, and to get a success, you need one d6. Over 10 rounds, I rolled 53 dice, didn't roll 1 6.
That's brutal.
And apparently the odds were something like 14 million to 1.
Oh,
It didn't make me feel any more special.
and you promptly sold all your books.
Yeah. So Symborum was the one I should have bought, not
Vason.
Vason.
Well, I've got to admit, I backed Vason for the recent British and Irish Mythic one they did.
Oh yeah.
What is it called? What's the title? Yeah, Mythic Britain.
Has
and
that got
Ireland.
a bunch of nice art in it? Has that got like real nice
Yeah,
Oh,
art?
the books are beautiful, to be fair.
But I sort of saw that, and I'm a sucker for, as you guys know, I'm a sucker for like British myths and stuff like that.
I don't think you've mentioned it before, John.
Yeah, I let it slip out once or twice. But I looked at that and I was like, oh, I really like that, but I've not got the original like Vason game. But one of the sort of backer tiers was like you could get a copy of like with the original book. So I was like, oh, okay, there you go. I'm in. I'll have both of them. But I'm still waiting for them to turn up. I've got they sent the back as like a sort of beta copy of the Mythic Britain and Ireland one, which I've got in PDF, but I'm still waiting for the main books. Apparently, like you can actually go up at UK Games Expo and like if you had proof you're a backer, you could just like get them. But like I said, I just didn't have time to like mess around with it because I was like, oh, run round, right back to running games.
Well, it was funny. I was on the ticketing desk at UK Expo, and this lady came up to the ticketing desk asking for directions to go to the Plaza Suite, and she had a mask on, and I said, I recognise that voice. You're Jessica from the Not D&D podcast, and she was like taken aback. Oh, you remember me? She listened to our show. Said yes, I'm your sole listener, and she was quite surprised that someone recognised the voice. So the following day, I was walking around the show, and she was on the stand. And I went to have a chat to her, and she remembered me. And I bought some of the Awful Cheerful Engine books. And while I was there, I said, "Oh, enjoy the show. Get these creators on." And she said, "Well, if you know any creators that indie creators, let me know." I said, "Well, there is one fella that I know in Canada, that he does the Charge. He's running this It's Jam, and he's written Charge and a few other games." She said, "Well, give him the email address and tell him to contact me." She said, "To be honest, I've not refused anybody onto the show yet because I need people." So I said, "Yeah, fine." So anyway, when I got back from Expo, I contacted Renee on Discord and I said, "Been chatting to Jessica from Emerald Publishing. If you're interested, she'll have you on the show." And he said, "Oh, fantastic. I've been trying to get on the show, but not been able to get hold of her. So hopefully it will happen and he'll get himself a bit of publicity."
See, why do these places never want like fat OSR obsessed like Englishmen? I can handle that.
Do we know any of them?
So I've got to say, like more than a few years ago because of the COVID, but I think it was either the expo before COVID. I was sort of sat outside the Hilton. I was like having a vape or something, and this like big guy, he must have been about 6 foot tall, like came like stomping towards me, and his face was like this, and I was like, "Aye, I'm about to get mugged then." And he got right close to, he got like proper like up close to me, and then cause I was sort of like wearing my like Red Dice Diaries hoodie, got like close to me, and about 5 foot from me, he sort of stopped and he went, "Oh, I've listened to some of your videos," and so like shook my hand, and I was like, "Oh yeah, great, nice one, cheers mate, cheers." You're that hot, like,
Yeah.
but so it's a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
It is quite a niche, though, isn't it? So, and like because we're in a pretty, small bit of geography, you go to that games, but if you go to the expo, you're probably gonna potentially meet everybody.
People think that the RPG hobby, is a big industry. It is, but compared to other stuff, compared to a lot of other hobbies, it's tiny, isn't it? It really is tiny.
It is.
So-
Super niche.
Well, it's like you say, even when you look at like the big players, like the big money makers in the RPG industry, even there, like they might be the biggest fish in the pond, but it's like a tiny pond compared to like some of the others.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I was going to say,
Go on.
talking about DM tips and tricks, I've also got this that I've got recently on Kickstarter.
Oh yes, yeah. I've got it on PDF. I've read a bit of it, but it's supposed to be good, isn't it?
I think it's for anyone who doesn't
Is that
know,
the randomizer? Is that the randomizer?
No. This is Tracy and Curtis Hicksman's Extreme Dungeon Mastery Second Edition, and it's a book of like tips and tricks for like DMs. It was on Kickstarter, but I backed it, and I'm enjoying reading it. But I've seen a few people who are like, "Oh, I didn't really get much out of it," and I can see what they mean, because it's a bunch of tips and tricks, but it's for running a very specific sort of style of game.
Style. Oh, right.
Yeah, it's for running that. For my money, it's for running that slightly more sort of story gamey sort of style of game, which I'm fine with. I can still appreciate the tips and tricks, and even if I don't use them, it's an interesting book to read, and you always take something away from it. But I can see why people are maybe sort of into like the more traditional games, and I don't say that to knock them, because I love my OSR stuff and my D&D myself. But I can see why maybe people are into more traditional games aren't really getting as much out of it, because it's not that sort of style of game that it's giving the tips for. But
my tips for people for GM advice, I always give the same of three. It's ICRPG, because I think Hank's advice for games mastery is fantastic. Numenera is the second one. I think that's great advice. And the third one is Dungeon World. I think if you're going to be a new GM, you read all three of the GM bits of those three. I think you can't go far wrong. They all give really good advice.
I think so. And I do like Sly Flourish with his whole philosophy around that lazy GM.
I've got to admit,
the way he breaks things down. He breaks them down well, I think.
Yeah, I've got to admit, since I read that like Return of the Lazy GM, and I've backed his like latest one that he's doing on Kickstarter. It's really sort of made me feel a lot less pressured about the prep. 'Cause I love the fact that he's like, oh, what you need to do is you need to do as much prep as you need to make you feel comfortable running the game. And so reading through that book, I was like, do you know what? I do spend a lot of time like doing prep because I feel like I ought to, and it doesn't really add a lot to the game. And I just get stressed that I've not done enough prep. Whereas now, even in the book as well, like, he gives you like, oh, here's my like 5, 6, 7, 8 steps for like my prep. But then he spends like at least 2 chapters going like, well, what if you haven't got time to do them 8 steps? Well, here's the steps like you can trim out if you need to. And I find that a godsend, because like, quite often I'll get to the stage where I'm like, oh, it's been a busy week at work. I've got like 2 nights to like prep my game for Friday, and I've realistically I've only got like a few hours each day to do that. So you're like, oh, I've only got like 6 hours to like prep it in, and I'd get quite stressed about that sort of like back in the day. But being able to look at like Return of the Lazy GM has just like made me feel a lot better about like the amount of prep I can do. And it means that I'm more focused on running the prep that I know is going to add value to my sessions.
I do all my notes in Obsidian, and I've got templates for the
Lazy GM, so have I.
So it's strong start, locations,
secrets and clues,
secrets and clues, fantastic locations, NPCs, monsters, and that's it.
Yeah, what's the finish? Don't he have some kind of something about the finish? He
rewards, treasures, isn't it? And he
likes to cliffhanger though, doesn't he? He likes a cliffhanger at the end.
I quite often like a cliffhanger at the end of an episode. My last one, they've all got things like hate orcs, and if they're fighting orcs, they roll more damage. And then on my last game, they just defeated the bad guys, and a burnt-faced orc has walked into the end of the battle saying, we need to talk about this dragon. And they're like, shit. And they're like, right, we're finishing now. No, you can't finish that. Yeah, we're finishing now.
And it makes it really easy for you to just roll into your next strong start, because it was like that powerful moment, and boom, you're off again. It's like leaving your writing halfway through a sentence so you can pick up.
I always think of the old Saturday morning cinema when you had like Flash Gordon would disappear off the
literal cliffhanger.
And the next episode, you see him jump out of the car before he even gets to the cliff.
It's such a con. You're like, hold on, I thought you went over the cliff.
But you couldn't rewind it to check, could you?
I'll tell you what, to jump back, we're talking about the old School Essentials, like advanced fantasy classes. one of the things I'm enjoying in Smoke and Snow at the minute with like Arfed playing in it is he's playing a barbarian, and he's just got to a level where effectively you can like call in like a barbarian horde to like attack something.
Oh, right.
And that's sort of been built up in like the player's mind to be like the nuclear option. Like, so whenever they get in a difficult situation, they're always like, might be time for you to summon the barbarians in, and we might have to like deal with it like that. And they've like held off doing it. We've finally got to this point where some like necromancers basically resurrected like Arfed's character's like deceased wife, and they're like, right, we're gonna have to go to this like vampire's castle and try and like take on this like old ass vampire. And then Arfed, bless him, unfortunately he can't actually make that session, but bless him, he's like we were chatting about it, and I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, well, I don't want to delay the game because it's only every couple of weeks, you know, so if we miss a session, that's like a month we're not playing. So he's like, so I was like, I'll tell you what, well, how about you have the barbarians attack the castle, and we'll say you're leading the barbarians, and you're like keeping all the undead armies at bay, and the rest of the group are going to like get into the castle. And he's basically sent me like a sort of speech that he's sort of cobbled together from numerous sources, and he's like said, oh, would you mind like reading this out as like my character as like his sort of like battle speech as he leads all these barbarians. And so I'm like really loving that. And that's this Friday, so hopefully that'll go well. I've been planning out a giant vampire castle, so
yeah. Well, in Middle Earth, they've been my characters have been hired by King Dane to get rid of a dragon which they met once before, and they managed to convince he was a fire drake last time. No, he was a cold drake last time. He's now turned into a fire drake. But last time they managed to convince him to leave because the Gibbet King was after him and was trying to turn him. But now he's the bad guy. So they're going, and they know they can't defeat this dragon, but they're going anyway. So it's and I have no idea how they're going to defeat it myself. So it's going to be interesting. I think half the fun is as a GM, you don't know what your players are going to do.
No, of course not. That's part of the joy of it, isn't it? I mean, I've said this numerous times. You know, when you get some people being like, "Oh, what happens if the players like go off piste with like the plot? They just go in some random direction." I'm like, those are the bits that I love the most. When like, I mean, obviously it's different if you've just got people messing around and being like contrary. Yeah. But if the players genuinely come up with something where I'm like, "Oh, I didn't expect that," I always think that keeps me on my toes, you know.
Well, in the Curse of Strahd, because I know Colin's running this, and I chatted with Arfred about it, but you know, in the town of Vallaki, you've got the Burgermeister, and you've got the cultists who are both vying for power. Well, when it came to the sun ceremony at the end, and the cultists rose up, my players didn't want to join either side, so they decided that they were going to rescue the Burgermeister and take him back to the house because they wanted to get into his mansion anyway. And I was thinking, well, what are they going to do now? Because now they've got the cultists against them. They got back into the house, went upstairs, found his son, who was obviously quite mad. I was expecting a big battle. They talked to him and found out that he had put swapped Stella for a cat's brain, so they were in the wrong bodies. So they felt sorry for him. And then the cultists arrived and they said, "Oh, we've captured the Burgermeister for you," and handed him over. And I went, so it went off from a battle to being an Ocean's 11 heist movie to a double cross. And I said, didn't see that one coming at all.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
It's,
I was going to say, Pete, you mentioned and Colin, you mentioned like the randomizer thing that I was looking at earlier. That's this, the Sandbox.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what it was called.
And I got that as part of a Kickstarter with these two Realm Fables books by Shield Dice Studios. And the Realm Fables books are just like big, like random tables. They've got like dungeon geomorphs in and various bits and pieces like that. They're described as like world generators, and it's all random tables to build the world. Then this Sandbox Creator was like a stretch goal, and in that it's basically got guidelines where you can use like a pack of playing cards, like laying out in a grid, sort of ICRPG style, and you can use them to make like a map. Or you can make like a point crawl with them, and you look at the suit and the number on it, and then you basically pick like one of these sandbox charts, like wasteland sandbox or like grassland sandbox, and then you roll a couple of dice and you put the dice on the cards, and they're like what the major features are, and you can lay out like a whole sandbox or a point crawl using that. And that's an idea I really love. So I've never been particularly a fan of like using cards in like role playing games unless it gives you something extra beyond what you can get with the dice, because I'm like, if you just use it as a random number generator, why not use dice? Because we've all got dice. Whereas if
I always try and I think I'm always trying to shoehorn cards into my games. I think because I quite like sitting. I think there's that bit of crafting with a card.
Yeah, I mean,
So you,
I think
make
my
up
sort
some
of
cards, make up a little deck.
yeah, I think my sort of I suppose like disgruntledness with it isn't the use of cards. It's the fact I think the cards could be used for more than just like a random number. Because and I like the fact with this, it's like the suit and the number mean something different. And then they said once you've got like your grid of cards laid out to make your rough map, you then roll like a d20 for each card. You put the dice in, and that determines the locations and there's other bits and pieces. And I really fancy, because like I say, this has been what's made me want to like fit a second game in, because I really fancy just for like 10 or 15 sessions maybe, seeing if I could run a sort of 10, it's like a little mini campaign entirely just using these like random charts from these books. Like, so make the map with this, use the random charts from these two books, and see how that would go, just as a bit of an experiment. Because often I've got so many like OSR books and books of random tables, and obviously the random tables galore on the internet, that I tend to just pull from all over the place. Whereas I actually quite fancy the challenge of sort of going like, right, okay, I'm still going to use random tables, but I'm only going to use them from this very narrow selection, sort of curate it down a bit. So I'd love to do that.
Less about the rules and changing up the rules as just trying to try a different method of approach, a different structure to running a game. You've done that a few times, haven't you? Like I'm trying to think. There was something else we tried out. I don't know if it was that one where we was going around in that, that world where we escaped into like a vessel of some kind. I don't know if you'd call it a spaceship, but you had them floating worlds in it, John. And you was doing a hex crawl, weren't you? You was doing a hex crawl, but you was working some kind of system then. Yeah. I remember it was something you wanted to. You had a system that you'd liked. Maybe you picked up a little supplement and.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the thing with me is if you pull from like everywhere, and you use a lot of different stuff in your games, which I normally do, it can be then very difficult to sort of isolate the individual elements and go like, right, did it work because I used this random table, or did it work because of all the other stuff sort of propping it up? So occasionally I'll run little games where I'll go, right, I'm going to concentrate on using just this resource as like the main sort of resource for this game, because then it's more easy to judge sort of like how worthwhile I suppose it is on its own merits, because you've not got loads of other stuff competing with it.
I mean, a lot of times with random tables, I don't actually roll the random tables, but I like looking at them to get ideas. Yeah. And then when I was writing one of the games for this itch thing, I had great fun in actually designing my own random tables. And I found that I'd write the random table out, put some things in, and then the following day come back, scrub a couple off there, add a couple in there. And I probably enjoyed writing the random tables as much as I did enjoy doing the rest of the game. And one of the things I came up with it didn't end up as a random table. It was like a table of list of verbs. And because it was a horror game, I wanted some cues for people. And so like for sounds, I had a list of like grinding, rhythmic, deafening, crunch, crack, rumble. And I had another one for darkness, another one for stress, with words the GM could come in. I don't know where the idea came from. It just came from the back of there somewhere. And then when I released it, somebody said, "That is a fantastic idea. What made you think of that?" I said, "I don't know. It just sort of popped into my head." But it seemed to. Sometimes you get these ideas, you don't know where they come from. I think with random tables, if they're good random tables, you can just flick through, can't you, and go, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
Yeah, definitely. They're great for inspiration.
I think to carry on, talking about sort of different words you use. One of my sort of, I suppose, favourite like non-gaming, although it is a gaming resource that I've got, is the Storyteller's Thesaurus, and I think that might be by Troll Lord. I can't remember, but effectively it's just a big list of like common terms you would find in gaming, and common words you'd use in like fantasy games and stuff. And like a thesaurus, it then gives you like loads of different alternatives for it. So it's really handy, like if you're like, I don't want to use the words like wooden door again, because there's been like 5 wooden doors in it. But sometimes, you're trying to do a million different things. It's difficult to suddenly like just pick a different word for it. So having
Yeah.
a book like that is really handy.
Yeah, I often use the old internet synonym search or thesaurus search
Ah.
because I think, oh yeah,
Well,
even for if I'm writing a game, I think I don't want to use the word traits, or I want a new word for charm or something like that, and it's great for giving you other ideas.
well, the one I think of is Glyn Seal with his Midland setting.
Yeah.
He put in that chart. I don't know if you remember it. I don't know if you guys know it, but John, you've run enough. Probably you might be familiar with his chart for different words for green,
Yeah.
because there's
Oh,
so
yeah.
much green. There's so much green in the campaign. I mean, it's quite tongue in cheek, but nonetheless, he's he's put in a table for different words for green, which
Yeah.
I've obviously got a certain fondness for.
Wonder why that is, Spike. Have you got one for spike pits as well? Have you?
But
Oh,
yeah, that's very, and it's like Gavin does his like less shit like +1 weapons tables and stuff like that. You know, where he's done it, and he's done them for like armor, scrolls, and stuff like that. And they're literally just tables where they don't give you any extra like bonuses or magical powers, but they're just like, oh, here's some like unusual characteristics that they might have.
Well,
And they're just
you
like
think-
little bits of flavour, but it's like
Yeah.
there's one we rolled in a game where like, every time a sword's swung, like a wheel of cheese appears at the feet of the person
Yeah.
who's like swung it, and it has no effect on like the pluses, but it's just a way like instead of just going, oh, you found a +1 sword of generic +1 damage, you can just roll on it, and people are like, oh yeah, it's only a +1, but like, have you noticed that every time you swing it, like a big wheel of Gorgonzola like appears?
I hate +1 swords and armor, and you know you watch like Lord of the Rings, and what does Frodo's sword do when his orcs around? It glows. There's nothing else, just glows.
Yeah.
And I must prefer something like that.
Yeah, and quite often, like, obviously, when it's like, for old school essentials and whatever, when you're rolling on like random treasure tables, quite often you'll get like +1 sword, +1 armor, whatever. But I'll quite often refer back to like Glenn's tables, because even if I don't use them directly, but just give me some inspiration, because I want it to be like, oh, that's that sword where, you know, every time you swing it, it like laughs like Skeletor, and I've used that. Whereas
Yeah,
instead of like
it is
being like,
cool.
oh yeah, +1 sword, throw it in the pile with the others.
I've just googled it. You were right, Trollord Games.
Cool.
So yeah, that'll be popping in me.
What is
It's a fairly
storytellers thesaurus?
Thesaurus,
Is it?
yeah.
Yeah, they do a Storyteller's Thesaurus and a Storyteller's Dictionary. They're both pretty chunky books.
It's a bit of a choice. It's $19 as a PDF on drive-through, or 15 quid as a hardback PDF delivered by Amazon tomorrow. I know which one I'm going for.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I picked them up. I was like, oh, next day delivery, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting book, and again, it's more of a reference book. It's not like a book you're going to sit down and read like page to page. But quite often, if I've got a bit more time when I'm doing my prep, and I'm sort of sat there and I'm maybe struggling for ideas a bit, I'll go, oh, where are they going? Oh, they're going to like a castle. Oh, so I'll flip through the thesaurus. Like, oh, let's look at castle. Oh, it breaks down all the different parts of a historical castle, and then it's got like the various different terms and like what they were called in different languages and various different sort of historical terminology for them. And just seeing something a little bit different can sort of get your creative juices flowing.
Definitely.
Right. So do we think we've done then? Do we?
Well, that's 2 hours of standing at the windowsill.
Which
Well, it's more than that because we started early, didn't we?
yeah. And as people know, once we get together, we can go on
And ramble.
Yeah, we do tend to ramble a little bit. Well, if you guys want to call it that, we can do. So, obviously, thanks to Pete, thanks to Colin. Hope you guys have enjoyed listening, and thanks to Evil Jeff, who's been like popping into the chat all the way through. So, I suppose
Awesome.
I'll just play the outro music, and then I'll stop the stream. Hopefully, we might get together and record like another one at some point. We don't know exactly when it will be, because we're all at the mercy of our schedules. It's probably not going to be that regular, but we'll try and let people know when we're going to be streaming as far in advance as we can. So I'm going to play the music and then I'll stop the stream. Take care, guys.
See you guys.
guys.